welcome aboard Movies on the Brain. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the heart-stopping world of Unstoppable. But hold on tight because this review is about to pick up speed and we're not stopping for anything. Spoilers ahead, my friends, so buckle up and get ready for a review that's as relentless as a locomotive tearing down the tracks. How did Unstoppable do in the box office? Unstoppable was released in theaters on November 12, 2010. It had a budget of anywhere from 85 million to $100 million. It was a box office success, bringing in $167.8 million throughout its theatrical release. Its opening weekend, it debuted at number 2 in the box office, only behind DreamWorks' Megamind by less than $7 million. Until its last 2 weekends, Unstoppable never went below the number 50 spot in the box office. Its last weekend in theaters, it was at number 57. It was only being shown in 34 theaters. Now let's take a look at the cast and some of the other roles that each of the cast members have had. Denzel Washington plays Frank Barnes. Some other roles for Denzel Washington include Robert McCall from the Equalizer trilogy, which he also produced. As of me recording this review, he is currently filming Gladiator 2, which is due out in November this year. Chris Pine plays Will Coulson. Some other roles for Chris Pine include Edgin Jarvis in Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, Darren Barronman from Clue-Man, and the voice of King Magnifico in Wish. Rosario Dawson plays Connie Hooper. Some other roles for Rosario Dawson include Wonder Woman in Space Jam: A New Legacy, Becky Scott in Clerks 3, and Gabby in 2023's Haunted Mansion reboot. Ethan Suplee plays Dewey. Some other roles for Ethan Suplee include Jason Anderson in Deepwater Horizon, Wilson in Babylon, and Gutter in God is a Bullet. Kevin Dunn plays Oscar Galvin. Some other roles for Kevin Dunn include Peace Chief Igo in Captive State, Bob Singer in Above Suspicion, and Vic Braden in King Richard. Kevin Corrigan plays Inspector Scott Warner. Some other roles for Kevin Corrigan include Phil the Bartender in Meet Cute. He's in a movie called Leave Not One Behind. His role has not been revealed. And David Brown Sr. in American Murderer. American Murderer and Leave Not One Alive are currently in post-production as of recording this review. Kevin Chapman plays Bunny. Some recent roles for Kevin Chapman include Mr. Jensen in Slender Man, Sergeant Leeds in City of Lies, and U.S. Marshal Cove in Outlaw Johnny Black. While Temple plays Ned Oldman. Some other roles for Lou Temple include Mr. Alonzo in Monstrous, Walter Brown in The Castle, and Jack Donner in Corsicana. T.J. Miller plays Gillislee. Some other roles for T.J. Miller include IROC in Ready Player One, the voice of Tough Nut Thorsten in How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, and Lewis in The Stand-In. Jesse Schramm plays Darcy Coulson. Some other roles for Jesse Schramm include Jennifer in Shot Caller and Angela Moreau in The Beautiful Ones. David Warshofsky plays Judd Stewart. Some other roles David Warshofsky has been are Darren F. Zanuck in Blonde, Joe in It's Not About Jamie Keene, and Dr. Rothstein in Feed. Andy Umberger plays Janeway. Some other roles for Andy Umberger include Abe in Burning Kennedy, Ed Chilton in The Accountant, and the voice of Carruthers in the LA Noire video game. Elizabeth Mathis plays Nicole Barnes. Some recent roles for Elizabeth Mathis include Nura in 100,000 Zombie Heads and Pushy in Zombie Crush or Blue Crush 2. Megan Tandy plays Maya Barnes. Some other roles for Megan Tandy include Marissa in Always a Bridesmaid, Sasha in The Trap, and Ashley Sorby in Piranha 3DD. Aisha Hines plays a railroad safety campaign coordinator that teaches students about railroad safety. Some other roles for Aisha Hines include Colonel Diane Foster in Godzilla King of Monsters, Billy in The Perfect Find, and Henrietta Hen Wilson in the TV show 911. Scott A. Martin plays the Brewster dispatcher. Some other roles for Scott A. Martin include Sheriff Brown in We Have a Ghost, Red Bloodbath in The Hurt Tapes, and Landis Foster in Union. Ryan Ahern plays Ryan Scott. Recent roles for Ryan Ahern include Officer Kelly in Magnum Opus, Brock in Limelight, and Glassman in Unbroken. Jeff Wincott plays Jesse Colson. Some other roles for Jeff Wincott include Mayor Rodney Jorkins in Kringle Time, Dr. Mercer in The Issue with Elvis, and Harley Biggs in A Philistine in Queens. Now let's get to the plot. In the Fuller Yard in northern Pennsylvania, children arrive for a school field trip on rail safety. Meanwhile, in the southern Pennsylvania town of Stanton, Will Colson, played by Chris Pine, gets up for work, stopping to surreptitiously, I don't know, watch his wife put their son on the school bus. He calls her, but she refuses to even answer. Arriving at work, Colson, a conductor, gets his orders for the day and learns that he will be working with engineer Frank Barnes, played by Denzel Washington, with whom he has never worked with before. He goes to a group of older workers with whom he has some barbed words over their age differences and finds Barnes among them. While he goes to punch in, the other older workers complain about being displaced by Colson, who say they got his job through family connections in the unit. Meanwhile, in Fuller, the yard master yells at a pair of hostlers who have been standing idle near a train to get it moved so the school children's excursion train can get out of the yard. In a hurry, one of them, Dewey, played by Ethan Suplee, decides to go for connecting the air hose between the locomotive and the rest of the half-mile long train. This, the other hostler reminds him, means that the train's air brakes won't be working, but Dewey says they will hook them up after parking the train on another track. Barnes and Colson meet their locomotive for the day, where Barnes, a 28-year employee, finds out that Colson, who will oversee the train, is only 4 months out of training. He reminds Colson that if there is anything he doesn't know, he should just ask. They take the locomotive out across the train to where they will attach their train for the day. Colson learns that a court hearing that morning didn't, as he had hoped it would, end with the lifting of a restraining order preventing him from seeing his wife and son. In the locomotive cab at Fuller Yard, Dewey turns the throttle to its highest setting, idle, to enable the train's dynamic brakes. As it approaches a switch, Dewey sees that it's not set on the right track, and against the advice of the other hostler, jumps from the slow-moving train to line it up properly. While he does, inside the 777, the throttle sets itself into the highest speed. When he tries to reboard 777, it has picked up speed and he falls to the ground trying. The train leaves the yard for the main line unmanned. After some slight setbacks at the yard due to Colson's inexperience, including taking on more cars than they had in their orders, the two leave Stanton for a zinc plant. In Fuller, the hostlers let Yardmaster Connie Hooper, played by Rosario Dawson, know that they have a runaway train headed into opposing traffic on the main line. Assuming the dead man's switch will trigger the brakes and it will be a coaster that stops a few miles from the yard, She calls Ned, a welder for the railroad, and tells him to meet the hostlers where they can get in his truck, catch the train, and stop it. By the time they get there, they realize that the train is under power and is going too fast to catch. Connie and the dispatcher work to get every train on the main line into sidings. The train carrying the school children narrowly avoid a head-on collision. Oscar Galvin, played by Kevin Dunn, who's Connie's supervisor, calls her and asks what's happening and what she's doing about it. She hasn't figured out yet how to stop the train and began calling state police to make sure the grade crossings on the line are secure, since some of the tank cars on the runway have molten phenol, a hazardous material. On their train, Barnes and Colson hear the dispatcher's order to pull into a siding. Barnes says they can't use the siding as sign since the train is too long for it. He asks instead if a rip track further down the line is clear. Galvin overrules Connie's suggestion to derail the train in an area of a lightly populated farmland since it would be too costly, and it's still possible to stop the train. An emergency meeting of railroad executives approve of another plan, but Galvin won't tell Connie what it is. The train's odyssey becomes a media event followed by helicopters with continuous coverage on televisions and reporters at crossings in small towns. The train, picking up speed, smashes through a horse trailer caught on the tracks at one junction. The company's plan to have a lash up of two locomotives go on the line ahead of the runaway and slow it down while another employee and former U.S. Marine Ryan Scott attempts to board the runaway locomotive from a helicopter fails and leads to the death of veteran engineer Judd Stewart. The police try another plan to trigger the safety switch on the locomotive side with close-range shotgun blasts at a grade crossing but stop firing when they realize the switch's proximity to the fuel tank. A state trooper's radar gun shows the train speed at 71 miles per hour. Barnes and Colson make it into the rip track in the nick of time as the runaway smashes through the back of their consist. As it passes, Barnes sees that the coupling of the last car on the runaway is open. He decides to put the locomotive in reverse and catch the runaway. Colson, at first hesitant, joins him. Galvin insists that Connie stops him, but she refuses. Another attempt to stop the train with derailleurs in a small town fails because the train is too heavy and too fast. Evacuations begin as the train approaches Stanton, where it crosses the town on an elevated curve where it will derail at its current speed. If it does, it will fall into a fuel oil tank farm, causing a major environmental disaster. Barnes and Colson catch up with the runaway after Colson manually couples their locomotive to the train, severely injuring his foot in the process. They begin slowing it down with their own brakes, but not enough. Barnes goes out onto the train and begins setting each car's brakes manually, slowing the train enough to get it past the curve without derailing. In the process, the locomotive's brakes blow out and the train begins to pick up speed again. Ned catches up to the train and Colson jumps into the back of his truck. Driving at high speed, they make it to the locomotive where Colson is finally able to get into the cab and stop the train. Ned and first responders pulled up to the now stopped 777, and Colson's injured foot is treated by the paramedics. Colson's wife arrives with their son and reunites with him. Connie arrives shortly thereafter to congratulate them, and while Ned is handling the press conference with another AWVR representative, surrounded by family, friends, and vehicles from first responders and news outlets. For the closing credits, it's revealed that Barnes was promoted and later retires with full benefits. Colson is still happily married with a second child on the way, has recovered from his injuries, and continues to work with AWVR. Connie is promoted to Galvin's VP position while it's implied that Galvin was fired for his poor of the incident, causing Stewart's death and costing the railroad money and equipment. Ryan makes a full recovery, and Dewey, who is held responsible for causing the situation, is fired from his job and goes on to work in the fast food industry. Now, here are some of my thoughts. For a movie that's only an hour and a half long, a little over, it flies by like the 777 does in this movie. The chemistry between Denzel Washington, Chris Pine, and Rosario Dawson is a lot of fun to watch, especially when they really start working together. The chemistry between Rosario Dawson and Kevin Dunn is a lot of fun too, especially when they're at each other's throats throughout various parts of the movie. I recommend this movie to anyone who likes disaster movies like I do, or anyone who is a fan of any of the actors involved. While it's slow to start the adversity that the two leading men will face, the last hour is pretty much nonstop action and thrills. If you're like me and don't really understand the railroad jargon, this movie is good at giving visual aids of what the characters are talking about either right before or right after. And honestly, I found out that Unstoppable is actually based on a real life event known as the Crazy Eights incident. On May 15th, 2001, in Ohio, CSX 8888 was pulling a train of 47 cars, including some loaded with hazardous chemicals, and ran uncontrolled for almost 2 hours, reaching speeds of 51 miles per hour. It was finally caught by a second railroad crew that caught up to the train in reverse and coupled it from the last car, just like in the movie. The runaway train managed to go from Walbridge, Ohio to Canton, Ohio, which is 66 miles before it was finally stopped. The exact load the runaway train was hauling was 25 empty cars, 22 fully loaded, including two paint cars filled with thousands of gallons of molten phenol, which is a toxic ingredient used in products such as nylon, various pharmaceuticals, detergents, and paints. The engineer of 8888 did just what Dewey did in the movie. However, when he attempted to reboard the locomotive, he was dragged about 50 feet before he was able to get free. The real life heroes that stopped the train were Jesse Milton, an engineer with 31 years of experience, and Terry Forston, a conductor with only 1 year of experience. Once Forston and Knowlton coupled onto 8888 and were able to slow it down. They got it down to 11 miles an hour. John Hosfield was able to hop on board, bring it to a complete stop at the Ohio State Route 31 crossing. CSX never named the engineer who unfortunately caused the incident or revealed what repercussions he faced. As of 2021, the locomotive is still in service, which was rebuilt and upgraded and is now under the number 4389. Now, here's some other interesting trivia I found about the film. Rosario Dawson is a real life train aficionado. She travels by train all over the world wherever possible, which this movie fits perfect for her, with that being the case. Denzel Washington recommended Chris Pine to director Tony Scott for the role of Will Coulson. Even though Denzel Washington is scared of heights, he actually did the stunt of running across the top of the train. Tony Scott used real newscasters as much as possible for television reporters. Chris Pine also performed his own stunts. The runaway train was being controlled by remote control. Jesse Knowlton, the real life engineer who chased after CSX 8888, served as the technical advisor for Denzel Washington. The Stanton Curve is a rail line in Bellaire, Ohio. The oil/chemical storage tanks were added in by CGI to increase the sense of danger. Ryan Ahern, the man who rappelled down in an attempt to stop 777, is a real-life Army soldier who served in the 101st Airborne Division, Iraq. During filming, the crew were referring to this movie as the taking of film 456 because it's the second consecutive train movie directed by Tony Scott and starring Denzel Washington. The first being the taking of film 123. Unstoppable was in development from 2004 until filming began in August of 2009. Thanks for joining me on Movies on the Brain. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all my latest reviews and discussions. Have a movie you'd like to see reviewed? Leave it below and I'll add it to my ever expanding list of movies I want to review. If it's already on my list, I will credit you for the idea of the review. Until next time, keep the popcorn popping and the movies on your mind.